Welcome to another Photoshop tutorial. This week's tutorial, we're going to add fog to a photo. So this is the image that I'm going to be working with in Photoshop. It's the old mill at Deep River Park in Hobart, Indiana, which is my hometown, where I'm from. And the mill is over 100 years old. It's a museum now in a park, and it's open for tours. And it's a real picturesque setting. So I took this picture in spring, you can tell by the tulips, on an overcast day. And we're going to, in Photoshop, add fog so that we'll end up with something that looks like this by adding fog in Photoshop. I'll also show you a second method which will make it look like this. So two different methods of adding fog. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so to get started, I have opened my image in Photoshop. As you can see, I have the image of the old mill in Hobart, Indiana. And I'm going to add fog to this image. So before I add any fog, let's talk about the type of image you want to add fog to. You want to make sure that the image that you're working on has an overcast sky or a real subdued sky. You don't want an image with blue sky and clouds and sunshine, because it's not going to look realistic with fog. When there's fog, there's no sunshine. It's overcast. So keep that in mind when you work on your images. Make sure you have an appropriate image. Otherwise, it won't look realistic. The first thing I'm going to do, as I do every time I work on a photo in Photoshop, is I'm going to create a duplicate layer. Right-click, duplicate layer. And I'm going to name this layer Old Mill. And I can deselect my background image. And the reason I always create a duplicate layer is in case I do anything destructive to the image and I want to recover the original image. If I had done it on the background, I wouldn't be able to recover it because it's destructive. But any changes I do now are going to be done on this layer, and the original background will still be there intact. Let's talk about naming layers. I've gotten into the habit of always renaming layers as I create them, because the default way that Photoshop will name your layers as you create new layers is layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. If you have a very complex image with lots of layers, it's easy to lose track of what's on each layer, especially if you're going to go back in and tweak settings and go between layers back and forth. You want to be able to find the layer that you need easily. So it's a good habit to always name your layer. And I'm going to create a new layer now. And I click on the new layer button below the layers panel. Creates a new layer, empty layer. And to rename it, you can just double click on the name. And we'll call this Fog 1. So I'm going to show you two different methods of creating fog. So this will be the first method, Fog 1. The next thing I want to do is I want to fill this layer with white. And I want to make sure I'm filling this layer and not the wrong layer. You can always tell which layer is active by the white bounding box around the layer. See the white box here? That shows this layer is active. If I activate this layer, the box moves down here. This layer is active. We want to fill white on the new layer, Fog 1 layer. We want to make sure our foreground color is white. If you have other colors in your color boxes here, instead of black and white, you can always quickly go back to the default black on white by hitting the letter D on your keyboard for default colors. Changes it to black on white. And then little arrows here, or you can also click on Let me put the colors back in here to show you. Okay, you can always click on the little black and white box above there. It'll also set it back to default. But I want white for my foreground, so the little arrows here switch foreground and background colors. Switches from foreground to background. Every time you click it, it switches it. So I want white as my foreground. Now I want to pick my paint bucket tool, which is keyboard shortcut G or the paint bucket icon. And I want to fill this whole layer with white. And there's your fog. No, I'm just kidding. We need to do a little bit more work. The next thing I'm going to do is create a layer mask. And I do that by making sure my Fog 1 layer is active and clicking on the layer mask icon below the layer panel. Add layer mask. I'm going to switch back to black on white. I want to fill my layer mask with my foreground color of black. And the way to do that is clicking on the mask and make sure the mask is active and not the layer itself. You can tell by the white bounding box. I want the mask to be active. I will hold down the Alt key on my keyboard and hit backspace. And that fills the mask with black. So anything that's black in the mask will be hidden. Black hides, white reveals. So right now we're hiding all of this white. Okay, we want to make sure we're working on the mask, and we're going to pick our paintbrush tool. We're going to paint on the mask, and we're going to paint in white because we want to reveal some of the fog that's hidden now. And we want to pick a decent size brush, maybe 100 and let's go about 200, something like that. 180, that's good. We want to make sure our hardness is 0. We want a very soft brush. And click on here to get out of that dialog box. Our mode is normal. We want that to be normal. We'll turn our opacity down to about 25%. And we'll turn our flow down to about, let's go down to about 15, 17, 15, something like that. I'll click in 15 there. Okay. So now I have my brush set, and smoothing should be at 0%. So I have my brush set, white set as my brush color, and I want to paint in the mask. And so everywhere I paint, you'll see the fog is starting to come in. And you just paint it in wherever you want your fog. So because I have my opacity lower and my flow lower, it's going to be very subtly coming in. I can turn my flow up if I want to go a little bit quicker. That's about 35%. There we go. And you just paint in your fog wherever you want. Like so. And it's up to you. You can, use your own judgment. Decide what you think looks good. Let's talk about fog. If you're in a real life situation where there's fog, the fog always seems denser further away from you in the background. Items that are closer to you are not going to be as foggy as items in the background. So we can erase some of this fog in the foreground by switching to black as our main color and painting out the fog. We don't want much of the fog in the foreground. We want most of it in the background. We can leave a few little wisps here and there. Maybe show the trees a little bit more. Leave the open areas a little foggier. The fog won't move around as much through dense areas as they would in the wide open. So switch back to white to add more fog here again. And it's up to you. You can add as much or as little as you want. So that's the first method. We'll add a little bit there, a little bit here maybe. Play with your opacity, play with your flow, brush size. keyboard shortcut for increasing your brush size or decreasing your brush size are the left and right bracket next to the letter P on your keyboard. The right bracket increases your brush size every time you tap it, and the left bracket decreases it. So that's a real handy shortcut to learn. It's a lot quicker than going up here and switching with the slider. Just use the keyboard shortcut. So, and the keyboard letter X flips your background and foreground color. You'll find if you learn the shortcut keys, it's very helpful in Photoshop. Makes it much quicker to be able to do the things you want to do. So there's the first method of fog. Here's the before, and here's the after. Now I'm going to show you another method. And first thing I'm going to do is deselect the layer we just worked on and create a new layer. Oops. That was I created a group. I didn't want to do that. I want to create a layer. Create new layer. Okay. And this layer, instead of filling it with white, we're going to go to Filter, Render, Clouds. And it creates this mottled kind of background. Okay. We're going to switch the screen, the blend mode to screen. And we're going to create a mask. Right here, create mask. And now what we'll do is making sure the mask is selected and black is our foreground color. And with our brush, we can paint out some of this wispiness. You see the clouds created a real wispy, the cloud filter created a real wispy looking type of a fog. And again, you don't want as much fog in the foreground as you do in the background. And you can control all that with painting black and white on the mask. I want to add a little bit right there, maybe. And then let's decrease, maybe show the trees a little bit. Oops. I created a guide accidentally. If you have your ruler active, and you click and pull down from the ruler, it creates guides. The way to get rid of those is you go to your view menu, clear guides. So I do that sometimes. I get carried away with my clicking on my mouse. That'll help a little bit and make the image a little smaller. So, and that's the second method of adding fog. And that was pretty quick and easy. Let's clear up the foreground here a little bit. Okay. Again, you can play with your opacity, strengthen it if you want to get rid of a little bit more. Play with your flow. There we go. And that's the second method of adding fog. It adds a wispier fog. So here's before, here's after. If it's a little bit too much, you can always adjust how what you think looks good. Let's add maybe a little bit more right in here. I'm going to show you what the mask looks like. If you hold on the alternate key and click on the mask, it brings your mask to the foreground. So here, where I've painted black, you can see where I've painted black, which hides the fog, and white reveals the fog. So this is what the mask looks like. And to go back, you just hit alternate again and click on the mask. So that's the second method of creating fog. And I forgot to rename my layer, as I usually do, so we'll call that Fog 2. There we go. So we have Fog 1, Fog 2. We can even mix both of them if we want a real dense fog. There's Fog 1, there's Fog 2, and there's both of them. So I hope you learned something from this tutorial. If you did get something out of it, and you feel like you would like to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please do hit the subscribe button. Also, click the little notification bell and you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. And like the video if you do. That helps with my with showing the video in featuring it on YouTube. So like, subscribe, and hit notification. Thanks. Look forward to next week's tutorial. We'll have another exciting tutorial next Friday. New tutorials every Friday, Photoshop tutorials. Have a great day, and thanks for watching. Bye now.